right, welcome, biology friends, to the first podcast of the year. We are picking up where we left off in class, just again anchoring down this idea of the scientific method and talking about what science is in the first place. So science is the study of the natural world using the scientific method. Okay, that's a kind of a obnoxious definition, which we can break down because now we've got two terms that we need to make sure we know what we're talking about. Those two terms are the natural world and the scientific method. Okay, included in the term natural world, essentially with this phrase in that definition, we are limiting what science is good at investigating. The natural world is the stuff of our universe. It's what our universe is made of. It's the matter and the energy. So the atoms, the molecules, the cells, heat, light, all these things that we experience as part of our universe. That's part of the physical world. And that's what science is designed to investigate. Now, what's not included in that term, the natural world, are ideas, things like religion, art, philosophy, these supernatural things that are outside of what we can understand in this physical world we live in. Does that mean that religion, art, philosophy, they have no place, no value? Of course not. They have place and value for many, many, many people. It just means that science can't really talk about them. Science can't really investigate the supernatural because by definition, the supernatural is not part of this physical, natural world and does not obey the physical, natural laws and principles that we experience. And so science is just ill-equipped to comment on that. And that's fine. It's another way to address our experiences on planet Earth, and it's a very effective way. Science is not good at commenting on moral and ethical concerns. Science can create things that may need to have moral and ethical aspects discussed about them, but science can't do that. That is the place for society. For example, if you have a medical procedure that can put someone on life support, even though they have no hope of making recovery, is that something we should do just because science allows us to do that? Or is that ethically wrong? Science can't deal with that. Society and other areas have to deal with that. So, since science is limited, does that mean it is not useful? Of course not. It is incredibly useful in finding cures for diseases. It's useful to find sources of energy, more efficient ways to use our resources. It tells us about the history of our planet and how we are related to other organisms on our planet. It's all kinds of stuff is incredibly useful that science does for us. It's just we need to remember what science should be used to answer. And when people start trying to use science to justify other aspects of life, we need to be careful because science is dealing with the natural world in which we live in. Now, as we already learned today, we do science by doing the scientific method. And that is typically taught to you as a series of steps that scientists go through to do what they do. But it doesn't really work as a concrete list of steps that people memorize. The scientific method is much more a way of thinking, and you do it quite naturally. It's not just a list of steps in a book, though that we can talk about it that way. And we will. So the scientific method is generally brought in the series of steps that begins with observing something that raises a question, Like, whoa, what is this animal? It looks like a giant squid. Where do they live? What do they do? How do they live? We hardly ever see those things. So something like that, or we have observed something that is a problem and needs to be solved, or something that just makes you curious. So something that is compelling to you and makes you have a question that you can't really answer just by opening a book or whatever. So the second thing we often do once we have this question is to make sure we can't answer it by looking at a book. Because if someone else has already answered our question for us, then we can save a lot of time and trouble, and we don't need to answer it from scratch using the scientific method. So the second step is actually often to research the problem of whatever it is we have observed. If it is Coleman's box of science, there are many ways you could research that. You could do what we did in class today. We could observe it some more. You can literally research it, though I highly doubt you are going to find in the library or online Coleman's box of science anywhere. However, you will find upperclassmen who have seen it before, and they might enlighten you. I doubt it, but they might. So, of course, we do this kind of research again to make sure that we don't have to go through all of this experimentation and so on when someone else has already found an answer to the question that we had. So, assuming that our research yields nothing, maybe our research helps us with some additional information, and that's good. That helps educate us a little more about the problem. It doesn't answer the problem. So then we might say, all right, based on what I know, based on what I've read, based on what people have told me, I think this could be possibly what is inside Ms. Coleman's box, okay? And so that is making a hypothesis, something that explains your original observation. Okay, you will hear people refer to a hypothesis as an educated guess about an answer to the question. We're kind of trying to get away from that terminology because people always want to focus on this word guess, and it's more than just some random guess. Now, more often, we're trying to call a hypothesis a possible explanation, okay, for what you have observed, okay? Something else to remember is that this hypothesis must be testable. So if your hypothesis about Coleman's box of science today was, I think that works because there's a little leprechaun in there and he pops in and he makes the water change color and then he pops out again. Well, that's not testable because if he's magical and he appears and disappears, then we really can't know about that. So magical things again involving supernatural powers outside of our physical experience, that's not a really testable hypothesis. It doesn't mean that supernatural, even if you want to go all the way up to the level of God, it doesn't mean that science is saying that they don't exist. It is saying simply that science can't investigate that. Okay? So if you have a good testable hypothesis, the next thing you would probably try to do is test it. And all that means is you would design an experiment to test that hypothesis. Usually we would perhaps design a controlled experiment, though that's not the only thing we might do. We might just do an in-depth study of field observation. In other words, if you wanted to study chimpanzee behavior, you're not going to see natural chimpanzee behavior if you take the chimpanzees and stick them in a lab and so on. So you might just sit out in the jungle with your notebook and record what they do, and that's certainly valid as well. Okay, but that's not really a controlled experiment. Now, the fifth step would be to do the experiment and collect your data, and that's, of course, hugely important. We have talked about data and the types of data you can collect, the information in an experiment. It may be numerical, like a measurement, a weight, a time, or whatever, and in that case we call it quantitative data. But if it is written descriptions or observations or even drawings, again, describing chimpanzee behavior or whatever, that might be qualitative data. All right? Now, once we have collected data, we have a bunch of data points or a bunch of drawings or a bunch of words describing what we've seen, it is helpful to arrange that data in a way that we can kind of get an overall picture of what it's telling us. And that is called data analysis. Often we might use a statistical analysis if the data is numerical or quantitative, where we calculate things like a mean or average, where we can get like one number that says, well, on average, plants grow to a height of 5 centimeters when exposed to sunlight for 8 hours a day, or whatever. Usually, of course, always, of course, a graph is a pictorial representation, line, bar, whatever graph. So you can use a pictorial representation of data with a graph that will help visualize your data set for you. And we will do that a lot in class as well. All right. The final step would be to draw a conclusion. You would look at your data that you have analyzed and say, does this data suggest that my hypothesis is on the right track or on the wrong track? Is my hypothesis supported by this data or is it rejected? So please stay away from this word proven. Let's say you have built a model of what you think Coleman's box of science looks like, okay, on the inside, and it works. It seems to work just like my box did. Does that mean it is exactly what was in my box? No, it just means it works like that. So it could still be off. We can always perhaps find more information that is going to alter our current perceptions of what we think we found. So we stay away from this term proven because that indicates finality. And we just say, well, the hypothesis is supported or something like that, or not supported. It's not on the right track. All right, once we have drawn a conclusion, you think you are done, and you might be if you're just in class, but if you are in the real world of science, you would not be done. You would share your findings with others in hopes that your findings can help others as they ask and answer their own questions, okay? And you may take from what you have done and springboard from that and go to a related problem. So there's always that possibility too. All right. So please just remember the scientific method is a way to solve problems or answer questions that have never been answered before. You can't just open up the textbook and get an answer. You have to investigate it yourself, okay? And I think that's it. All right, I hope that you were able to get what you need from that, and if you have questions, please bring them into class next time. Take it easy, and I will see you very soon.